Hi everyone, and welcome to Week 9, Lecture 2. This is a generic lecture on how to create a presentation. So we're looking at 4 areas: identification, creation, rehearsal and delivery. So what does a good presentation consist of? It has a clear purpose. It communicates a clear message. It informs or persuades your audience to take action. It encourages interaction or dialogue between you as the presenter and your audience. It might be an unaccompanied talk, or it might be a talk that's supported by visuals or multimedia. Many people use the term presentation only referring to a talk that's supported by visuals or multimedia, but a good presentation, regardless of what tools you use, will encourage interaction between you and your audience so that your audience takes real interest in the message that you're delivering. The tone I want you guys to take in the 736 presentation is that you're having a conversation with the people in the room about your research project. Steps in the process. For identification, what we're going to go through is the date required, what the occasion is, the format that's expected, who your audience is, how long it should be, and what your message should be. So the first of these that we need to think about is our date. How long have we got to prepare? If you've got months or weeks, you've got lots of time. If you've got days or hours, you need to really plan carefully to make the best use of all the time you've got available. And success in most presentations depends on how well you prepare your speech or your spoken text, your personal delivery, how well you plan and organise your visual or multimedia materials, and whether you've got any handouts or supporting materials, because they too need to be professional. Of these things, the most important is your speech or spoken text and your personal delivery. The occasion. The nature of the occasion is going to determine what message you want to communicate and how you deliver it. For example, you might not want to reveal confidential information at a press conference where there are journalists present, although you might want to share confidential information with your colleagues at an in-house event. So the things to think about: is it an in-house event, a press conference, an event for an external audience that's hosted by you at your organisation, an event that's hosted by another organisation, an external exhibition or trade show? For you on this course, this is an in-house event. You also need to think about the message that you want to communicate on the occasion and how you're going to deliver it so that it suits the occasion that you're speaking at. As you can imagine, an event hosted by an external organisation such as a conference, your presentation will be quite different to that at a trade show where you're actually just having chats with people. The third aspect of the identification segment is the expected format that you have to deliver. So you need to consider if you're speaking to a small group or addressing an audience of hundreds. The audience size will drive how you present. What kind of venue is it? Will it be a small seminar room or a large auditorium? Those answers will determine whether you present informally or whether you speak to a microphone, whether you want to write on a flip chart or a whiteboard, or whether graphics need to be projected. Then you need to think about what presentation equipment is actually available where you're going to be presenting, and consider whether you might need a sound system. Sometimes a lapel mic might be necessary, and if you're going to need one of those, then you want to practice first so that you're not constantly brushing past it. Once you know all those constraints, then you need to decide on whether you're going to deliver a formal or informal presentation, what communications channels you're going to use, and what resources you might need, for example, what you might need to hire or borrow. The next aspect to consider is who your audience is. You need to consider the composition of your audience, and that will help determine the style of language that you use in your presentation. For example, are they visual, kinesthetic or audio learners? How much education have they had? Are you speaking to school children, blue-collar workers, soccer parents or engineers? Then think about category. Are they existing or potential customers, industry colleagues, employees, managers or directors, sector groups, or the public? That will guide what you present and the tone and pitch of your presentation. Also think very carefully about jargon. You want to ensure that what you're saying is clearly understood by the people in the audience. So if there are very esoteric management terms, you need to explain what they are to the audience. Your audience knowledge will guide your presentation style and tone. Fifthly, under identification, we have length. In general, keep it as short as possible. Take as much time as you need, but don't string your presentation out with waffle, as your audience is going to get bored. If you're speaking at an event where you're allocated a specific length of time, you're going to have to plan your presentation to fill the time available. You don't want to speak for the entire time, so ending with an interactive question and answer session is usually a really good way to go. Good planning and practice really matter. A 5-minute presentation is going to differ considerably in your plan from a 1-hour talk. Though both require the same amount of practice, the planning for a short talk is much more difficult than a long one. If you haven't got very much time to say everything you want to say, it can be a real challenge to deliver what you need to say clearly and concisely in your time limit. But if you've got a whole hour, it can be a real challenge to keep the interest of your audience. You need to ensure that your presentation, regardless of length, is lively enough to keep your audience's interest, especially after lunch, because after lunch we're digesting and people tend to feel sleepy. People will also be very tired if they've been listening to speakers all day long, so you want to do something to get the blood flowing and make people feel that they're involved. When it comes to your message, what is in your script should not equal what you see on the slide. For example, this is a message done poorly because there are far too many words on the slide. Tufty, who is a PowerPoint guru, says you should aim for 40 words or less per slide, because 40 words can be read in 8 seconds, then the attention of the audience, if they're visual learners, can be switched back to the presenter. This is the same message done well. You should focus on the main message you want to deliver. So the teaching aphorism for this is tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you've told them. Determine the key points you must cover in your presentation and use short phrases for bullet points to reinforce the words or to emphasize key facts. Use language appropriate to your audience. If you're addressing the general public, don't use industry jargon or include specialist technical detail. If you're addressing industry specialists, on the other hand, you should include technical details, but don't necessarily assume that everyone understands the really detailed jargon. Make sure you explain everything clearly regardless of who you're addressing. Be very careful with humour, because humour is not universal. Probably the only universal humour is self-deprecating humour, where you're laughing at yourself. Really think about whether your audience will respond to humour positively. You don't want to offend or turn your audience off, so be very careful about using humour. If you're using PowerPoint, use the wizard for creating flow in your presentation. The PowerPoint wizards are very good. Your slide text, consider those to be cues and expand what you want to say via your notes. So you write very sparingly and your audience is cued into what you're saying by your slides while they listen to your verbal expansion. And your audience really should be listening to you, not reading the screen. Don't use long sentences, and PowerPoint slides are not your cue cards. You should be talking around this, not actually reading off the screen. That really annoys people because they can read about 4 times faster than you can say it. Use quotations sparingly, and where you can, actually shrink them for fit, so you're taking out excess words. It can be difficult to read something in a short enough time to make sense of a speech, and people lose the continuity of the presentation. As Tufty said, aim for 40 words per slide or fewer. The second subtopic, creation. When you're making your slides, you need to ensure that you schedule time to write. Once you've done that, return after some time to polish and proof, because you'll see mistakes that you wouldn't have seen if you were trying to proof straight after writing. double check that you're keeping to the message that you want to deliver to your audience. Print a hard copy script to take with you on the day, so that's notes pages, so you can read your script and be cued by your slides. It will help you remember where you are. Even if you're just doing an unaccompanied talk, the PowerPoint's note pages will help you keep structured. Also, when you're preparing slides, keep backups of earlier versions, just in case you delete something because you think you haven't got time enough to present it. Then as you're actually practicing the presentation, you find you've got more time, you can actually add things back. Remember to in-text reference and to have a bibliography at the end. And also think about using diagrams rather than using lots of text. For example, all this information is the equivalent of this image. What works best, 51 words versus an image? So have a think about this. Although this is a bit of a cluttered image, you can see there's more impact and more ability to understand the proportions of the particular aspects of the data by using an image. When you're creating your PowerPoint presentation, try to avoid using too many of the bells and whistles, or at least try not to use them all at once because it gets very confusing. Keep it really simple. The KISS principle, keep it simple smarty, really applies here. Don't use lots of fade-ups flying in multimedia. It really annoys your audience, so limit your animations. Be very sparing of what appears on mouse click when you're making your text visible. I do use mouse click quite a lot these days in order to be able to screencast the lectures. However, it does actually slow you down. Only use images that are related to the topic you're delivering on. Trying to explain an aspect of your findings, use a graph that's related to that particular finding. Ensure your backgrounds aren't too busy, because it can interfere quite seriously with the ability of the audience to read it. Avoid embedding web media or links to web media wherever possible. Make sure that you get the opportunity to test on that PC whether web media or MP3s or AVIs, anything like that, will actually run from your memory stick before you do your presentation for real. If it doesn't work, it will make you look unprofessional. Disable pop-ups so that they don't suddenly appear during your presentation wherever possible. Sometimes you can do that by making sure that you're not connected to the web. Ensure your text is easy to read. For example, in the business school, I would use 24 font. If I was delivering to tradespeople, I'd use 28 and fewer words on the slide. What I'm talking about with animations is things like this, where everything's a little bit different and it's quite annoying. Thinking about backgrounds being too busy, that's a perfect example. Disabling pop-ups, that kind of thing appearing in your presentation is very annoying. With regard to making sure your text is easy to read, this dark background is much harder to read, and this is actually bolded text, but it is still hard to read, so think about keeping to black words on a light background. When it comes to creating interaction with your audience, you can plan in activities such as asking questions and then gathering answers throughout your presentations like I do in class, getting your audience to play a quick game, perhaps giving audience beforehand a quick question maybe a week earlier, and then giving them the results and a prize for the correct answer within the presentation. Equally, you could do something like a competition and a lottery where there's a number stuck under their seat and someone gets a free copy of something. You can do some sociometrics, so in other words, you ask a question and get the audience to move to the place that best demonstrates their answer. Or you can use volunteers, get some volunteer assistance to help you do something. Or anything else you can think of. You just need to do a dry run and check that it will only take a very few minutes of your time, not eat into your valuable presentation time too much. Next, we look at rehearsal. Now really what you need to do here is practice a lot, and practice out loud. When we speak out loud a presentation that we've written, we will find all the places that we're going to trip up and run into difficulties. If you speak it out loud, you can trim it, you can take out what you trip over, rephrase awkward pieces, change the flow, the emphasis, and generally polish it. If you only read it in your head, you will not be able to do that. So practice out loud and keep doing it so that you know what you're going to say and it becomes almost automatic. Time yourself on each run through so you know how long it's going to take. And you'll notice that your delivery gets better as you shortcut some parts and emphasize others. Deliver to an audience and ask them for feedback. That's a really useful way to go. Memorize your key points to aid your delivery, and practice will help you do that. And in addition, practice is going to help you override your own nerves. Gary Player had a wonderful saying, "It's a funny thing, the more I practice, the luckier I get," which is just fantastic and really ties in to practicing. The picture that's on the screen is about a possibly apocryphal story about a Polish pianist called Arthur Rubinstein, who was very famous. And the story goes that Rubinstein was approached in the street near Carnegie Hall in New York by a man who asked, "Pardon me, sir, how do I get to Carnegie Hall?" To which Rubinstein replied, "Practice, practice, practice." That was his motto for becoming a world-renowned pianist. Next, more rehearsal. Prepare in advance. Recheck your dates, your time, your location and your venue so you're really sure of what you need to do. Plan your travel so you've got time to spare and get a park. Check your content. Make sure you've got your presentation notes with you. Check you can answer reasonably foreseeable questions within the presentation. Rehearse at the venue in advance if you've got any opportunity to do that, and I can try and make some time for you to do that as well. Test all the equipment and the technology to make sure that you're familiar with everything and you know how it works. And in case the technology fails, practice your delivery without any of the support things that you might need. If you've got your PowerPoint notes with you, then you can still do your delivery. And just imagine how difficult it would have been for these guys to have actually done their delivery without technology. By the way, that last slide had 31 words on it. So delivery, preparing on the day. You can help yourself by doing some things. Everybody is nervous about giving presentations. So what you can do is be well prepared on the day. Arrive in good time. Be really familiar with the presentation space. Have tested everything in advance. Avoid confidence boosters like loads of coffee, drinking too much water, or taking any stimulants. Make sure you go to the loo before you start. Remain calm, so control your breathing, breathe deeply and slowly. Maybe even calm yourself by going for a walk outside or by walking to the presentation itself. One thing you can do is listen to classical music because apparently it stimulates the beta waves in your brain. And lastly, make sure you've got some water and sip that. Take a pause to actually sip some. Prevent your mouth from becoming dry, but equally to give yourself a moment to think at times. When it comes to your delivery, if you're going to hand out any material, make sure you've prepared high quality materials. Make sure you've got them to me the week before so I can get them printed. Decide what format you're going to use for your materials. You might actually decide that you'll email handouts afterwards, or that you may email handouts before so that participants can follow along with your presentation on a digital device. Thinking about timing, let your audience know that there are handouts available, and then think about the ordering. Do you want them to have the handouts before you start, during the presentation at a particular time, or afterwards? And let the audience know that. The one thing about giving handouts early is it lets the audience decide their own pace. If members of the audience are visually driven, they can follow along on the handout. If audience members are audial, they will follow along to what you're saying regardless. So handouts do let the audience decide their own pace of absorption. Then delivery, the last part, doing it for real. Walk slowly onto the stage or into the presentation area, so don't rush. Speak clearly and project your voice so that everyone in the room can hear you introduce yourself and your topic. Speak with enthusiasm so that the audience becomes interested and engaged in what it is that you have to say. Don't speak too fast or people won't be able to understand you. Introduce yourself, your organisation and your topic. Use notes to cue yourself if you lose your place. Don't read off the slides on the projector screen or on the PC. Remember, using your notes instead will mean that you don't get pulled into reading exactly what's on the screen. Make eye contact with your audience as much as possible. It will help them stay engaged. Remember, you set the rules, you direct your audience. It is not the other way around. You can decide whether you're going to answer questions during the session or at the end, and just tell your audience. Many speakers prefer to answer questions at the end. Some prefer answering questions as you go along. Just make sure you don't get sidetracked from your presentation, or that you don't bore the majority of your audience with great discussions about obscure aspects of your topic that's relevant only to a small minority. If you're asked a question that you can't answer, just say so. Ask the questioner to give you their details. After the presentation, you can get an answer for them. No one knows everything, and it's perfectly natural to be asked a question you can't answer, and then enjoy yourself and the applause at the end. So we've covered identification, creation, rehearsal and delivery. In summary, if you prepare well for your presentation, you are more than halfway to successfully presenting. Funnily enough, the more you are prepared, the more confident you're going to feel. And that confidence enables you to inject loads of energy into your presentation to make it stimulating and engaging for your audience, and to have that ability to have a conversation with them. These are the bibliographical materials that have been drawn from for this presentation.